if a politician like myself, a political leader who aspires to be leader of the opposition of our country, cannot speak out about the undoubted problem we have as a country with Islamist extremism for fear of being falsely labelled as a racist by an individual such as Saeed Awazi, then that is a very troubling situation.
I don't think she's called you a racist.
She has said that my remarks were wrong and extremist.
Over the last week or so on Times Radio, we've heard from 4 of the 6 contenders for the Conservative leadership: Tom Tugendhat, James Cleverly, Priti Patel and Mel Stride. No Kemi Badenoch yet, but today we're going to speak to the 5th. It is Robert Jenrick who's in the studio with me. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Let's start with the present before we turn to the future, because there are pretty terrible things happening and predicted to happen on the streets of mostly England this week. Your aim is to become leader of the Conservatives and possibly Prime Minister. If you were Prime Minister right now, would you be doing anything differently to what Keir Starmer is doing?
Well, look, I think we can all see that the government understands the severity of the situation and is taking important measures, whether that's getting more prosecutors, having court sit over the weekend. I think there are more steps that could be taken. I've suggested the other day that leave could be cancelled amongst police officers, that you could make use of special constables, that there could be more mutual aid between police forces. We should be surging police officers now into the affected areas so that we can take back control of our streets. I also think it is important that we, as politicians and political leaders, don't act in a way which could be seen to be partial. We mustn't be squeamish or selective in how we call out violence. The violence that we're seeing on our streets is wrong wherever it is coming from, whoever is responsible for it. And the way to unite the country at this moment is to be very clear about that.
So who has been selective? Who said something that you think is possibly selective?
Well, I think the Prime Minister has not been as clear as he could be about the fact that whilst the majority, the overwhelming majority of the incidents that we've seen have emanated either from the far right or from a range of thugs and criminals who've chosen to take part in these events, there are nonetheless a much smaller number of sectarian gangs who have been causing disruption, violence and intimidation, for example, in Birmingham. And that is equally wrong. And it is important that we have the moral clarity that is necessary in this moment so that violence is violence and is called out as such, whoever is responsible for it. I'll give you another example.
Yeah.
I thought it was quite wrong that Jess Phillips, the Home Office Minister, literally responsible for safeguarding and for taking action against violence perpetrated against women and girls, appeared to explain away or justify intimidation against a female journalist and sectarian gangs on the streets of her own city in Birmingham. And neither the Prime Minister nor the Home Secretary has made any comment upon that. That's wrong. I don't think that's leadership. We need now to be bringing the country together with a unifying message, and the way to do that is to call out violence and extremism wherever it's seen.
I think the sad thing about the Birmingham situation, and we've had the MP for the area on, and he seemed to be kind of excusing what went on, which was disappointing. We've tried to speak to West Midlands Police about it, and it's unclear really about... We had Jim McMahon on from the government today, and he said, well, the police decided for whatever reason to regroup and withdraw, presumably because there weren't enough of them. So we still don't actually know what happened. And we know what we saw. We saw gangs of Asian men looking quite intimidating and attacking a pub. But we still don't know what was going on there. That's for the police to answer, isn't it, really?
It is, you're right. And it's not sensible for politicians like myself, who are not equipped with all of the facts, to weigh in on whether or not the police took the right decisions there. Ostensibly, it is very concerning that large groups of men carrying weapons, looking deeply intimidating, were able to gather in that space. We've heard reports from shopkeepers and residents who had to cower inside their premises and homes during that period. So I think there are questions for the police to answer, but it is also incumbent upon our political leaders to show the necessary moral clarity in these situations and to call out violence, intimidation, and extremism from wherever it comes. Because, you know, what we saw with the far right attacking a mosque, that's disgraceful. When we saw individuals brawling with the police, that's disgraceful. Smashing up shops, that's disgraceful. Equally, sectarian gangs in retaliatory protests and riots is disgraceful, and we will need our politicians in this moment to be calling out each in equal measure.
Okay, each in equal measure. Is that another way of talking about two-tier policing? This is a phrase that you have used before. You used it around the pro-Palestine protests. A lot of people are using it as a hashtag. Elon Musk is using it, saying that the Prime Minister is two-tier Keir. Do you agree?
Well, look, I'm not going to have words put in my mouth by Elon Musk. What I do think, however, is that the police must robustly enforce the law without fear or favour. I have been critical of them in the past, for example, in some of their conduct in response to the October the 7th protests in London. I thought it was quite wrong that you saw Islamist extremists on the streets of London, apparently being able to act with impunity. You heard chants like Allah Akbar off Oxford Street. You saw genocidal chants like from the river to the sea being projected onto Big Ben. So I will call out the police. It's right in a democracy that we hold the police to account.
But in
I
this
think in
instance,
this moment, I do not think it would be helpful for politicians like myself to be making the life of the police more difficult. They are acting bravely. They are trying to do their best, and we should be backing them to the hilt. There will come a time, once this violence is quelled, hopefully that will happen rapidly, when we shall look back on this and see how well it has been handled by the various police forces across the country. We'll also need to think carefully about some of the causes and underlying concerns of members of the public, whether that's on migration, extremism, integration, or other issues.
Okay.
But that is not for now,
Right.
because there can be no justification whatsoever for the kind of violence that we're seeing from any quarter.
Why do you think we've arrived at this situation? Now, some people will draw a line. It's not a very straight line from what happened in Southport, which was awful, to what's happening now. And other people say, well, there is no line to draw here. Is this about language? In recent weeks on your X account, you said on the 8th of July, Keir Starmer's first act is to surrender to the people smuggling gangs. On the 21st of July, you referred to open season for small boats. Your pinned post says mass migration must end. Saida Varsi, you will know, has been tweeting at you overnight and says that you, Robert Jenrick, should reflect on your language and conduct and what impact it has had on where the country finds itself. So when you do reflect on your language and conduct, what do you conclude?
Well, let me be clear. It is quite wrong to use events like this, disgraceful conduct by thugs and racists, to try to close down the legitimate debate that our country needs on very important issues like migration. If you do that, then I think that does precisely the opposite of what some of those individuals are suggesting. If centre-right or centre-left political parties do not have an open and responsible debate about migration, then we will see the rise of extreme parties, such as on the far right.
But Saida Varsi doesn't think you are being responsible.
Well, I
language.
fundamentally disagree with Saida Warsi. She originally criticised me after I said in the House of Commons that I was worried about the rise of Islamist extremism in this country. Now, if a politician like myself, a political leader who aspires to be leader of the opposition of our country, cannot speak out about the undoubted problem we have as a country with Islamist extremism for fear of being falsely labelled as a racist by an individual such as Saida Warsi, then that is a very troubling situation.
I don't think she's called you a racist.
She has said that my remarks were wrong and extremist.
Okay.
That is a very troubling situation because I want to have a debate in this country.
We all
and I
want to
think
have
if
a
we
debate.
shut down that debate,
Yes, but
then that leads to millions of our fellow citizens feeling ignored.
Well, very much
and
so.
then that
But is
fuels the
language-
rise of
of
genuinely
course.
extremist
Is
individuals and
language,
parties.
well, that's really interesting. Is language important, though? Because using words like surrender to the people smuggling gangs, surrender is the word there.
Well, I think that is what the Prime Minister has done.
Okay. And the other example I was going to use was from a former colleague of yours, Suella Braverman, when she talked about an invasion of migrants. Is that the right language to be using, do you think?
I think you have to appreciate the anger and frustration of the public. There is a role for politicians to choose their language with care, and I try to do that. There's also a role, though, however, to understand the genuine concern of the public and our constituents. That is part of being a politician. And at the moment, there are millions of people across our country who feel deeply angry and let down by the conduct of political parties of all persuasions on this subject. They've seen politicians elected, frankly, for my whole lifetime, on promises to control and reduce migration, only to do precisely the opposite. The way to restore public trust and confidence are for politicians and our political system to actually deliver once again. That's what I'm arguing for. I want controlled migration. I've argued that Parliament should step in and set a legal cap on the number of people coming into our country. I've also argued that we should take an altogether more robust approach to illegal migration.
Okay.
For example, by leaving the European Convention of Human Rights so that we can do that. If we get the right policies, deliver for the public, then we will stop this erosion in public trust.
I want to talk about what the right policies are. Now, you've argued that the principal reason that the Conservatives lost the general election, well, one of them was because of broken promises, including reducing immigration. You resigned as a Home Office Minister in December 2023 in protest at the government's approach to tackling illegal immigration. You want to restore the Rwanda scheme. Are you the Nigel Farage of migration? He wanted Brexit, but not like that. You want to reduce immigration, but not like that.
Well, I'm not sure what you're suggesting there. I want to reduce legal migration and to keep our promises. We've lived through a period of rapid rises in our population, a period of mass migration. In the 25 years before 1997, net migration to our country was 58,000. In the 25 years since then, it's been 5.9 million. So this is an unprecedented period in our history. I think it's placed immense pressure on housing, exacerbating the housing crisis, made it harder for young people to get on the housing ladder.
But it happened under a Conservative government.
Well, it's happened under both political parties. It's over the last 25 years that this has happened.
But your party made specific promises, as you yourself have
I've not defended that. What I did when I was in the Home Office, when I saw the harm this was causing to the country, the housing crisis, access to public services, fraying public trust, community cohesion issues, I set about to change that.
Right. But you want the Rwanda plan.
If I may just finish the point, I secured from the Prime Minister at the time the biggest set of reforms to our legal migration system in history that will reduce the number of people coming in legally by around 300,000 in the years ahead. When I wasn't able to achieve any more reforms, I resigned, not because that was an easy thing to do, but because I didn't want to be just another politician who made and then broke promises on migration. I think that is so corrosive to public trust in politics and democracy, and we have to fix it.
But what my point that I was going to make was that you wanted the Rwanda scheme, you supported the Rwanda scheme, and then you said, no, it's not strict enough.
Well, I was right. The version of the Rwanda scheme...
We'll never know, will we?
Well, I think we already do know that, because the version of the Rwanda scheme that was ultimately pursued was not one that was capable of working.
But it was never actioned.
Well, we know, for example, that of the hundreds of people illegal migrants who were brought into custody in advance of being removed from the country and sent to Rwanda, by the time of the general election, only a small handful of those individuals were still in custody because they'd been released on bail by immigration judges pending hearing of their individual claims. Exactly what I said would happen. I predicted that the bill would not change the merry-go-round of individual claims. It was undermining our ability to remove people from the country. So the argument that I made at the turn of the year was correct. I still believe passionately that you have to have a deterrent. What the Labour Party, now the government, is arguing is that you can somehow smash the gangs by arresting your way out of this problem. There's no evidence for that. I've sat down with our National Crime Agency, our Border Force, our security services. They all say that in addition to that important work, you also need to interject a serious deterrent such as Rwanda.
Well,
so we will
the
have
thing
to
is,
have one again in the years ahead.
Well, at least we'll get to see whether the Labour plan, whatever it is, whether it actually
But it's
works.
not working today, is it?
Well,
because we have record numbers crossing. Thousands of people are coming across.
And they would say that they've only been in power, they've only been in government for 4 weeks. I think you have to give them more than 4 weeks. You had 14 years.
Well, sure, but it appears to be open season now. You're having thousands of people coming across on small boats.
Okay.
And that is going to lead to all of the problems that we've seen in recent years, whether it's hotels, homes being bought up to house illegal migrants, which is what Yvette Cooper has recently announced. That isn't what people in our country want. And we've got to have an alternative.
All right. Well, I think it's fair to say that we do have to wait and see on that. But Robert Jenrick, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.